In this video, I'll show you how to solve the ALEKS problem called using a trigonometric ratio to find an angle measure in a right triangle. This problem is going to give you a right triangle with the lengths of two sides provided, and it's going to ask you to find the value of one of the angles. So the first thing that I want to remind you is SOHCAHTOA, which helps us. So I can't write and talk at the same time. SOHCAHTOA. This helps us remember the relationship between sine, cosine, tangent, and the three different sides of a triangle. So since we have this written out, hopefully I got it all correct, we're going to take a look at our angle x, and let's go ahead and assign the opposite hypotenuse and adjacent sides based on angle x. On angle x, the side opposite of that angle is the one that we designate the opposite side. The other two sides are the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. Of these two sides, the longer one is the one that we call the hypotenuse, and the shorter one is the one that we call the adjacent side. So for this triangle, we know the adjacent side and the hypotenuse, and that means that we want to be working with cosine. Cosine is the relationship between the angle of x, the length of the adjacent side, and also the length of the hypotenuse. So cosine of our angle x, which is what we're trying to figure out, is the adjacent side, which has a side length of 12, over the hypotenuse, which has a side length of 16. Now, to solve for x, we're going to use the arc cosine or the inverse cosine. Basically, we're dividing both sides of this equation by cosine. So that's going to give us this, cosine to the -1, 12 over 16, or you might see that written, or you might yourself write it as arc cosine 12 over 16. Now, it looks like ALEKS does want us to actually calculate this out because it says let's get it to the nearest tenth of a degree. So we're going to need to use a calculator for that. Let's get that pulled up. And with your calculator, you always want to make sure that it is set in degrees, not in radians. So let's go ahead and go to the settings on this calculator. Your calculator is probably going to look a little bit different unless you have the same calculator as me. But I can see there my angle measure is in degrees, not in radians. So I'm good to go with that. And then we can go ahead and do the math on this. My calculator uses arc cosine, and you can see that it is using it as just a cosine. So it's not even writing out the arc. It just says a cosine 12 over 16. So I'm going to put, I want the arc cosine of 12 over 16. And that is 41 point, ALEKS wants this to a tenth of a degree, so 41.4 is my angle.